I was lost in Chicago, and the snow was coming down in thick sheets. My watch read 4:52 p.m., and I was still nowhere near the office. I had a warehouse full of computers to sell and a potential buyer interested, but probably not now that I was late. I was lost in a neighborhood that I'd only seen on the news, the kind that screamed you don't belong here. Many of the windows were boarded up, and people stood around small bonfires in the falling snow. As I fumbled with my cell phone, I saw the reflection of someone walking behind me. He wore gang colors and was deliberately slow, but I clocked him nonetheless. I quickened my pace, but his footsteps matched mine. I turned the corner, and my heart sank. 2 more guys appeared ahead, leaning against a chain-link fence, smoking. They looked up at me, then at the guy behind me. He wasn't stopping. My instinct told me to run, but where to? There was an alley to my right. Not much of an option, but it was all I had. I darted into it, the snow muffling my steps. It was a dead end. I turned around, expecting to see the gang closing in, but instead, something else came. An ice cream truck crawled into the alley like it didn't belong in this world. Its headlights illuminated the falling snow, and the creepy music stopped abruptly. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped a clown, but this wasn't the kind you'd see at a kid's party. Its makeup was cracked and its eyes were wrong. It smiled at me with a set of teeth that didn't belong in any human mouth. It asked me if I needed a lift, its voice loud and gruff. I was frozen. The clown took a step closer, then another. Its gloved hands shot out and grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the truck. I screamed, kicking at him and doing everything to avoid going into that vehicle. Suddenly, a voice shouted, "We'll take it from here." The gang had followed me. One of them pulled a .45 from under his coat, the others brandishing chains and bats. "We've been waiting for you, freak," the first one said. The clown's head snapped towards them, its smile curling impossibly wider. It let go of me, its attention now on the gang. "We needed you as bait, but this is gang business now," one of them said, glancing at me. I didn't argue. I bolted past them, hearing the clash of metal and something that sounded like a gunshot, then laughter. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station on the main road, shaking and gasping for air. Even now, all these years later, I still hear that creepy jingle sometimes, faint and distant, and I wonder if that clown is still out there in the snow. The disappearances had started a month ago. No one could explain them. There were no broken locks, no signs of struggle. People simply vanished. Small-town cops in sleepy neighborhoods don't handle mysteries well, and the whole town was afraid, and so was I. Tonight, the March air felt heavier and colder, like the silence outside wasn't just quiet but watching. I woke to a soft creak, not from my room, but from the oak tree outside. My heart jumped, and I sat up, blinking into the dark. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I saw her. My grandmother Neji was sitting in a chair by my window, motionless. I hadn't heard her come in. Her gaze was fixed on something outside, her posture was stiff. I followed her eyes to the oak tree outside. At first, it looked like just an obscure shadow among the branches, then it shifted. Moonlight spilled across a figure crouched on the highest bough. Its limbs were long, its face unnaturally pale. The eyes, they burned faintly, not bright but alive, like coals smoldering in a dying fire. I froze, every muscle locking into place. Neji didn't look at me, she didn't need to. I could feel her tension, the same fear coiling in my gut. The thing in the tree wasn't human, its movements too fluid, its stillness too perfect. It was watching us, the way a predator watches prey. My breath hitched, and Neji's hand held my arm, steadying me. She whispered that it had not long been turned, and couldn't yet control itself. Her shoulders straightened, and she stood slowly, moving to the window. Her presence felt calm, but it was the kind of calm that came with a storm. Her lips moved, not in prayer, but in Hungarian words I didn't understand. The thing in the tree immediately shifted, tilting its head. It had heard her. I didn't need to understand her words to grasp their meaning. She wasn't begging it to leave, she was commanding it. Her tone carried authority. The creature climbed down, its movements fluid and alien. It paused at the base of the tree, looking back at the house. Even at a distance, I could feel its hunger, a raw and feral need that burned hotter than its glowing eyes. Neiji's voice rose, sharp and unyielding. The creature flinched, just barely, then turned and vanished into the shadows, as if the night had swallowed it whole. For a long moment, there was only silence. My grandmother turned to me, her face lined with an expression I couldn't place. She sat back in the chair, her eyes still on the curtain-covered window. She didn't say a word, but I knew what she was thinking. It was gone, but not for good. I drove through the winding streets of my hometown until my mother's house came into view, which was also my childhood home. It always made me feel nostalgic to go back there, and she opened the door before I even knocked. My mother's face was warm and she smiled as soon as she saw me. The air inside was heavy with the smell of bleach and something faintly metallic. She asked how my journey was, and said that she'd made a giant meat pie for us to enjoy together, then guaranteed how good it tasted. I said that I'd join her momentarily, as I really needed to freshen up after such a long drive, to which she seemed a little taken back. Her pause was small but sharp, her smile faltered for just a moment before she nodded, but I noticed it. I walked up the stairs to the bathroom and turned the lock behind me as I got inside. My heart was pounding because the woman downstairs wasn't my mother. Her voice was wrong, her movements were too stiff, but the biggest giveaway was that my mother had been a vegetarian since she was 15. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone. I called the police and whispered the address, my voice barely audible as I stammered. As I hung up, the lights went out. The bathroom plunged into darkness so absolute that I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. My ears strained against the silence until I heard it. Her footsteps darted up the stairs as she shouted something in Latin, though the meaning was beyond me. I pushed my back to the door as she slammed against the other side of it and pushed the handle. Her voice swelled to the point where she sounded like a man. I managed to push my feet against the bathtub and my back against the door as the frenzy continued, but then as abruptly as it had started, the chanting stopped. There was silence for a moment, then I heard those footsteps again, slower this time and accompanied by laughing. What was this god-awful thing that was impersonating my mother? Was it even human? I didn't know. Suddenly red and blue lights bloomed through the bathroom window as police officers broke the door down, but she was gone. There was no sign of her anywhere, just overturned furniture and shattered glass. They searched the house, the yard, even the woods beyond, but there was nothing. They listened as I told them everything, their faces grim but skeptical. Then I asked the question I was too afraid to ask before. Had they found my mother? The answer was no. Weeks passed, flyers went up, searches were organized, but they never found anything, not a trace. I moved far away, but the memory follows me like a shadow. Sometimes, in the dark, I think I hear her voice again, speaking in that same guttural chant. And I wonder if she's still out there, wearing someone else's face, waiting for the right moment to strike again.